everyone. Welcome to Listen, Love, Connect. I have a special guest, Becca, coming on. I'm going to invite her real quick and we'll get started. I just invited her. Hello, everyone. Thank you for hopping back on with me. Today we will be discussing about service animals. Hi.
Hi, sorry everybody. Apparently my phone likes IG, but not my laptop.
That's okay. We had trouble last time with Cami, and she reminded me. That's why I asked you if you're using your phone or laptop.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
I like your hair.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I was just telling everyone that we will be discussing today about service animals, therapy animals, emotional support animals, the difference in relation to autism.
Yeah.
And I just want to give a brief bio of Becca. If I'm correct, I'm saying that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Becca and I actually met in Colorado in 2019 at an autism resource fair. And I actually got to meet Sir Walter. And do you want to give a quick bio of yourself? Because you do so much.
Yeah, sure. So I was diagnosed autistic when I was 36. That's about 9 years ago now. And I currently do consulting work as well as speaking and writing. But I also do a personal development course that I designed for autistic adults. One of my really big passions is quality of life for autistic adults. We don't have a lot of information on that, and we don't have a lot of supports and services at all for us. And so as I was going through my own diagnosis, there was nothing. And one of the things I knew about myself was that I loved animals, and it was clear that my connection with them was more important to me than human connection. So I really started working with that, and that's how I kind of got involved with having Walter. And now I have a crew, an entire crew.
So, what are some of the things that you feel that you don't get, that Walter doesn't get credit for?
Well, it's a complicated thing, and kind of deciding where Walter fit in everything was part of my whole decision-making process. I'm a rescuer at heart, and I always worked in animal shelters, so I knew I couldn't go purchase or like couldn't go buy anything. I needed to go find my animal. And so when I got Walter, it was an experiment, because I don't know whether he can do things or can't do things or what he's capable of and all of those things. He was a puppy, he was 6 months old. So I don't know any of those things. But I knew I wanted to try, and I knew I wanted to try to teach him how to support me, because if I could show that I could use an animal to support me as an adult, maybe we could have something bigger grow out of it for other adults, right? And the other piece of it is that autistic people, for whatever reason, we connect, and almost always our first connections at all with anything outside of ourselves is with animals. So it's a really comfortable topic for a lot of autistic people. It's also where we find a lot of safety. So I really thought I was like, I'm onto something. Like, this is not only a place for us to find our own version of supports that we can train specifically for ourselves, right? But it can also be a way for people to find employment and for people to do other things, because we lose money when their economy tanks in every industry except for the alcohol industry and the animal industry, right? People never stop taking care of their pets. And so it's a really safe industry for people to go into. So being a dog walker or a groomer or those kind of things is really a good outlet and a good place for autistic adults to find themselves. So it was with that idea in mind that I started training Walter. Again, he's a hound mix, so they are known to be stubborn. And so I knew I was getting that. And I knew I had to start with just basic obedience and move from there, right? And I started to do that, and it was really a research piece for me, like where he fits, because I didn't know then the difference between an emotional support animal, therapy animal, and a service animal. What I was finding was that there was no belief that autistic people had anything that was so particularly command worthy or task worthy to be considered service.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, like, what they help with a lot for us is giving us space when we're out in areas of crowded space. That is not considered a task. or it wasn't at least then considered a task. And another thing we get is proprioception from our animals. So they lay on us a lot, and that relieves a lot of stress, gives us emotional regulation, and it also helps lower our anxiety levels. Right. For many of us, it's also kind of a booster, like a recharge, it works as almost. So you see us using weighted blankets, and essentially our animals can become warm, breathing weighted blankets for us, right? While at the same time giving us tactile stimulation, right? When we pet.
Right.
So it's a very soothing thing. So those two things were really what he was providing for me. And yet I couldn't quantify those things in a task way to qualify as service. Right. And so I didn't want to do that. That didn't feel right. Like the service world wasn't ready for like autism support animals at all. And so it was difficult. Then I started researching into therapy, and I said, okay, well, I work as a professional with autistics, so maybe a therapy animal. Right.
Right.
But then when I did that research, you find that a therapy animal is only a therapy animal when they're therapizing. Right. So like that you have to, if it's your animal and you're the therapist, it has to be a three-way situation for your animal to actually be a therapy animal. All the rest of the time, they're just a dog. Right. That's
Right.
it. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, that's closer, but not quite right, because he's working all the time, my dog. Like he doesn't have days off or time off or anything like that when he's just a dog, unless I allow him and give him the permission to be just a dog. Right. So he really wasn't that either. And that's when I really got hooked into what an emotional support animal can do, and really where I wanted to be with him. And the biggest problem I was having is that most people didn't understand the job of an emotional support animal. And they also didn't believe me.
Yep.
Right. And
And I
so,
still think we get that a lot today is people still don't know the difference. And I get a lot of, oh well, my animal helps me with this. I go, that's great, but it's not still not emotional support animal because you have to
right,
have this, this, and this.
right. And so when we talk about that, so here's the big difference for me, and this is the one that I talk about all the time. It is, you're talking to me about Walter, you will hear this, right? It is really important for us to understand that when we talk about therapy animals and service animals, it is the animal that is being tested and qualified, right? When we talk about emotional support animals, it is the human that is being qualified, right? And so when you need an emotional support animal, you have to have essentially a prescription from your doctor, right? And you're supposed to technically carry that with you whenever you're using your animal's emotional support, right? And you also have to understand the limitations of your emotional support animal, right? Without a service qualification, you can't just bring your emotional support animal into the supermarket or a restaurant or whatever. They have limitations. They can travel with you, right? Which was really helpful to me. I was able to fly with Walter, do conferences with Walter, and all that kind of stuff. And that was great. And he gets to stay with me wherever I stay. So if I'm staying in a hotel, he stays with me. Airbnb, he stays with me. Right? That is it. That's where it ends, is there. So there's no wandering into the supermarket with your emotional support animal and saying, oh, you can't ask me about my disability because I have an emotional support animal. Well, no, they can, because you're the one that's qualifying, not your animal. And so we need to be really clear about that, because there's lots of fakes. And the fakes don't know the rules, so they will break them. And so I'm sure you've seen it too, where you get almost any animal. You can go on a website, pay a certain amount of money, they'll send you a little ID and something to put on your leash and this fancy certificate that means zero.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything. It's not a real agency. And so we have that problem. So then
And
when
because
we
of
really
the
need him,
we can't take the emotional support animals on planes anymore, which
yep.
is a bummer.
Why? Because the peacock lady thought she could bring her peacock onto a plane, which is not nice to the peacock. And if you love your peacock, why are you taking your peacock on a plane? Right? It's not nice. And so it got ruined for us a lot, that place. But I think our bigger problem is that we don't really have a good government regulating business place. Like there's no 800 number to call necessarily to find out those differences, to take the tests, to do all those things. It's really still very privatized. And that's, I think, what's hurting us right now. Um, but I think what happens to poor Walter is here he is. He's just doing his job, and he does it really when I don't even ask him anymore. I mean, he does it all the time,
Yeah.
right? And he's doing it 24 hours a day, and he gets the least amount of credit out of all of the animals, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, let's think about that for a second. He does a really important job for me, and it might not be something that feels like a support to somebody else, but it does for me,
Right.
right?
So we
So,
have a question.
sure.
She said, what do you mean this, and this? What conditions qualify for emotional support animal?
Okay, so anybody can qualify for an emotional support animal if you have a therapist,
Yeah.
right, or a psychiatrist that says you need one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's not about the diagnosis, it's about your therapist and what they write in their letter. So if you have a mental health condition and you think an emotional support animal is going to be helpful to you, right, you can ask your therapist to write you a letter. That letter has to be rewritten for you every year. It has to
Mm-hmm.
be fresh and new every year. So you have to constantly be in therapy. It's almost more important for emotional support animals that our letter is up to date than almost any other one, right? Because there's no
Right.
testing that goes with it. So really, as a person, you're vouching for your animal. You're saying, I know, like, my animal's not going to poop in the middle of your airplane. They're trained not to do that, right? And
Right.
all of those kinds of things. But you can't train a peacock not to poop on an airplane, thus, terrible idea, right? And
Right.
so that's how it happens. But that's really what you need to do. It's not about the condition, it's about your therapist and whether or not they believe in writing prescriptions for emotional support animals.
And they also ask what conditions qualify a therapy animal.
Almost anything. Again, when we talk
Basic
about
obedience.
right. So when we talk about therapy animals, again, now we're talking about the animal and its qualifications. So there is first the basic obedience test that every dog has to pass. There are some therapy dog tests now. I was told also we can do the service dog test for therapy animals as well. It's basically the same thing. We're trying to make sure that the animal and the human being connect and that the communication is followed through with all the time, right? That my dog's not going to see another dog and jet across a hospital to go get that other dog, right?
Right.
That's what we're looking to test. When we do
Machinery.
service testing, then we do that specific task testing also, right? That's
Yeah.
another level. But you can have anything and use a therapy animal.
Mm-hmm.
You can be any age. You can have any condition. All it is that the therapist you go to has a registered and trained therapy animal that you use during your therapy sessions,
Right.
right? And that's it. We are finding more and more things and reasons to be using emotional support animals for our health anyway, in general, in terms of human healing, right? There's this weird study that's so weird. I'm a cat lady by heart, like I'm genuinely a cat lady. And there's a study that is out that talks about how you heal 15% faster when you are surrounded by cats purring. Something about the tone at which they purr helps us to heal, which is crazy,
I
right?
wonder
How
if it's the
absurd,
vibration.
right? It has something to do with it, and for whatever reason, that kickstarts the human body into healing. We're just finding that stuff out, so I can't imagine how many conditions we're going to see therapy and emotional support animals really be a help in them.
And
It's helpful.
sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
So, for some of you who don't know the difference, is service animals and emotional support animals are for one individual. A therapy animal is for the whole population. So when I go, a lot of you might know, is I have 3 therapy animals with me, and when we go, we do group settings. So we see group homes, we see a group of kids. So it's for everyone, not just for an individual.
Yeah. And it's very specifically, you can be as specific as you want with your training. That's the best part, right? If you
Yes.
develop a good relationship with your partner, right, they start to really read your signals. And sometimes, like, Walter's figured out things that make me feel better that I didn't know made me feel better, or has recognized that I was feeling anxiety that I didn't know I was really feeling just yet, right?
Yeah.
I'm someone who not only has autism, but I struggle with alexithymia, which is identifying your emotions, right?
Mm,
So I will feel, and I know I'm feeling something, but understanding what it is and where it's coming from, what caused it, is a delayed effect for me. And oftentimes Walter will know before me, and he'll be all, sit down, mom, I gotta lay on your legs for a minute, and things aren't cool, right?
right.
And it's different. And I want to share this too. I have 4 dogs total.
Yeah.
Um, only Walter is an emotional support animal, but my husband will tell you his dog is an emotional support animal too. But only Walter has really been trained for it. And he and I have a different relationship than I have with any other pet in my house. I don't know how to explain it. I can't quantify it. I just know that it is. And it's not a jealousy thing for the other dogs. It's just we communicate without needing to really communicate now. We've been together for so long. So it's a really special bond too. It's a really important emotional piece in my puzzle too.
So I want to ask you something. So
Mhm.
you know how when they describe service animals, therapy animals, and
Mhm.
all that. So service animals are task trained for a certain person with disabilities. Then there's therapy animals who just need like their basics and all
Mhm.
that. But then you get to emotional support and they say there's no training involved. How does
No,
that make you feel? Because for
like
me, I'm
true.
like that. I'm like, oh my God, no, that's not true.
Right. I mean, it's not true, right? If you're asking your emotional support animal to do anything outside of your house, they need training. Period. I mean, all dogs need training. Let's start there.
You're
But if
right.
you're going to be using a non-dog as an emotional support animal, they need training too, right? And the best part about training to me is the bond that it creates. Like when you train, you're learning as much as the animal is learning how to communicate with each other. These are the
Right,
words we're going to use. These are the sounds or the hand motions that we're going to use, right? And that means you have your own personal little vocabulary with this animal. And
right,
that's really important. It's like, and it fills a void for me that I don't have in other places. I don't feel that kind of connection that way to other human beings the way that I feel it to my animals. And so it really is an important place in my life. And it makes me mad that first of all, that I spent money on training, first of all, because I had to, because
right.
I have a dog and it's a responsible dog owner. I have to train my dog. But also, I then spent X plus amount of hours doing essentially preparing him for a therapy dog slash service dog test. Right?
Right.
I spent hours putting a carrot on the floor. Don't you touch that carrot, Walter. Not until I tell you, right? Not
Right.
until, like hours. And he's a hound and he can smell it and he's like fighting it, right? And so that's work. And I
Yeah.
did all that, but everybody else who has an emotional support animal that's a dog didn't necessarily have to do that. And so it's upsetting. I mean, the one time I've had Walter actually attacked by another dog, it was actually a quote unquote service animal,
Mm,
right? Who had purchased there, right? And they're untrained. So,
yeah.
and they were allowed to do whatever they wanted with their dog, right?
Right.
And here I
Right.
am with emotional support animals, probably trained better than most dogs out there.
Yeah.
And he's working all the time. Like he works all the time, unless I'm sleeping and he's sleeping. He gets off time in his kennel and I get off time in the bed, you
You're
know.
right.
But other than that, he's working.
So would
Um,
you say he is a task trained emotional support animal because he does deep pressure therapy and all certain tasks?
at this point, I feel comfortable elevating it to there because I think we're starting to be received as a
Mm,
tool. And now the vocabulary in therapy world and in service world is starting to see proprioception as a task. And they're
yeah.
starting to understand that crowd control as a task. And
Yeah.
so when that gets accepted as an actual task, yeah, I mean, I could then sit Walter in a service test, right?
Hmm.
I don't need him to turn the lights on and off for me. I don't need those specific tasks. But I do when I need proprioception, having it on command is fantastic,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
that's really important. So yeah, I love telling people that he's task trained because he understands um, what his job is at all times. And it's a crazy thing that he now does it out of habit. It's just his place in the world. And he doesn't feel good when he's not doing his job. And that means he's getting something out of it too. And I love that part.
So for some of you who don't know what task training is, it's more of So what she's meaning by crowd control is, I don't know if it's the same for you, but I know crowd control is when the dog is spinning around you to give you space from other people.
Right.
So that is a, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it doesn't. They don't have to be doing it fast either to
Right.
be doing the crowd control. So don't think of it as like spinning, spinning, spinning like that. They circle you more. They
Yeah.
slow circle just to sort of keep people from invading your space. Yeah.
And for some other things, alerting is a task for certain um,
Mhm.
anxiety,
Yeah.
migraines, seizures, stuff like that.
Right.
Also, some emotional support animals aren't task trained. Some of them are just to give the person a purpose to get up in the morning, to
Yep.
have a routine. So, not every emotional support animal is task trained like Walter and Monroe.
Right.
Monroe is my emotional support animal who is task trained. But yes.
So it's really important that we like understand that
Yeah.
because for especially on the spectrum, I cannot tell you how many people, even though they don't know they're using an emotional support animal, are using their pets as emotional support animals. They literally help people to keep a schedule, to remember to eat, to remember to
Yep.
go to the bathroom, right? A lot of us have a misconnection in autism between our body and our brain. We get delayed signals or no signals about hunger and bathrooming. But knowing that, oh, it's lunchtime for Walter and then he's got to go out before he can eat and all of this stuff, well, my bathrooming comes into play then too. And my lunch comes into play then too.
Yeah.
And it also keeps me grounded through my day, right? Super easy for me to get hyper focused and forget where I am and doing and stuff. But Walter will not forget dinner time and a moment
Right.
in his life. And so he will let me know it's dinner time very loudly, right? And so it keeps me throughout the day on all of those things, keeping me scheduled and sort of grounded through the whole day. So it's a really great tool in that way for autistic people. We need a lot of reminders. We use our visual reminders, we use auditory reminders, and our pets can be our reminders, right? But
Mhm.
again, we wouldn't see that as a task in service world.
Right, right. We have a question. They asked, how does she use her animals for autistic children?
Oh, I don't, is my answer. I don't work with children. I work with autistic adults. And Walter's not a therapy animal, so I don't use him in therapy with other people. However, I will say that when I work with my clients and they don't have an animal in their house, I can tell the difference in the way that they are, in their kind of energy. And I often suggest that they get a pet, not necessarily as an emotional support, but as that reminder, as that somebody to come home to, as a reason to wake up in the morning, as something to add joy to their lives, right?
Right.
And so it's sort of I don't work with them with children unless I'm out in the world being me, and I meet someone who happens to be autistic and have an autistic kid, and that little kid wants to pet my Walter, right? A lot of successful things I've seen though for children has been a lot of the training pieces actually. So when we have to train a dog, we learn a lot about our own body language and what we're passing through the leash, right? What energy we're using, the tone of our voice, right?
Hmm.
We learn a lot about that stuff. And those are all things autistic people need help with. We need help with knowing what our body limitations are and what energy we're putting out of our body and how loud or quiet our voice is. We don't always have control over that. And so for children, it's a great way for them to start connecting with their body and their brain to start learning those things about how to control their body and how to control the tone of voice. Um, the dog will tell you clearly if you're doing it well, because if they don't do their task, they didn't understand you, right?
Right.
And all of those things. So it's an instant learning lesson all the time. The other thing it works wonderful for kids is it's a conversation starter.
Hmm.
So we know autistic struggle with social stuff. If I go out in the world with Walter, I am guaranteed I have to have a conversation and it will be about Walter. Right. Thing is, if we talk about Walter, I'm okay because I know all about Walter and I can talk about Walter till I'm blue in the face. But I don't want to talk to you about the weather. That's not going to go
Right.
for me. Right. So it's a great way to kind of know, okay, I can queue up social interaction and we can center it around this. And it's a short social interaction and then we move on, right? So it's a great practice space for kids on the spectrum. Um, and I just think, overall, the relationship that gets developed between autistic people and animals is really special. And if we don't provide that to their kids before, like in that space when they're learning to articulate their needs, it's a really big help in terms of that and learning how to describe it in that space. Because as a kid, you can't really describe what's happening for you. You don't have the words for it, right?
Right.
And so the dogs are more, it's a more of an instinctual conversation. You don't have to ask with words for what you need necessarily. So that's where I see it being helpful for our children all the time. Yeah.
So, at what point in so right off the bat, did you think an emotional support animal was going to help you?
I knew it would because I'd had animals my whole life. And so there was an instinctual sense that I used to come home from school after a horrible day and I always had a cat. And it would just, I'd come home and play with my cat, brush the cat, sleep with the cat, snuggle the cat. And that's what I looked forward to in coming home. I also know myself well enough to know I didn't want children. So I definitely didn't want that. I knew my whole life I just wanted to grow up with a house full of animals. And I'd kind of always been told, don't be the crazy cat lady. Don't be that weird single lady who just has animals and all that stuff. So society really warped my view of what I wanted out of life. Well, sorry, society. I have 6 indoor cats, 2 outdoor cats, 2 snakes, and 4 dogs, and no children. 0. And I'm happy and I love it. And so I think I knew as a person it would work for me. What I gleaned about how it would work for other people, I gleaned along the way, thinking about it from an employment perspective, understanding it from a kid's perspective and what it works for them, and all of that stuff. And so that was learned along the way. But I think I personally knew, yeah, this will work for me.
That's great because like in some cases it doesn't work, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in a majority of cases that I've seen, it's had a significant impact in the person's life. Even with just my short visits with some of my animals, you just see the change in the body.
All the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to get on airplanes when we take an airplane and Walter's a larger dog. So he's 65 pounds. He's not a small dog. So I always bought a seat for him because I don't want to inconvenience the other people in my like area. So I always want to make sure he can kind of lay down by my feet and stretch out. He's not a tiny dog. So we used to get put a lot in the very front of the plane because it has that little extra foot space, right? So it would be me, my husband, and Walter in the front row. And and of course I get disability, so I get on first. That's the other part. And so I'm already on the plane when the rest of the plane has to board. And I have a video of everybody walking in the door and you can see their face getting on the plane and how serious they are. And they're getting on their plane with their luggage and they're in such a rush. And then you see them see Walter and you see their entire face change and they all reach out and pet. They ask a question. They make a connection. And it's changed their mood in like that little and so I took videos of it because I thought it was so fascinating.
Yeah.
Right? But that's how much it works. It's an instantaneous thing, and it's so not people specific because here's an airplane full of people who don't know Walter or each other coming in and all being affected, right? And then when we all get off, because we try to either get off first or get off last, everyone's got to say goodbye to Walter. Now they've had an experience. Wow, we didn't hear him the whole time on the plane. Is he okay? Yep, he was doing his job. You shouldn't hear him, right?
Right.
And so a wonderful experience when it goes well.
And when you started off, Walter, to now, have you seen a significant change in people accepting him more?
Yes, more people understand about emotional support animals now. But we're still fighting all the people that have done it illegally and wrong so much that more often than not, I run into people who either don't know what an emotional support animal is or want like me to tell them what it is, or they have bias already about emotional support animals. And so I'm needing to kind of undo what people have done. So every time I take a plane and Walter goes through and nobody hears him for an entire flight, it's like a win for me, you know?
Yeah.
We can do this if we do it right, you know? And so it's gonna, I think, come down to us getting a regulatory agency and also adding that training piece for emotional support animals.
Do you still think we have a long way to go?
Yeah, huge. Yeah. I mean, as a society, we're only just beginning to understand how important they are to us and what they can do for us. And so asking people next level to see them as, you know, equals, peers, partners in life is a next step. So hopefully we'll get there.
Well, this was so nice meeting you. Do you have any last words for our audience?
I do.
Okay.
And this is a big one for me. This is a soapbox moment, you guys. Please don't go on the internet and buy a pre-trained autism dog. Please. They're charging you $10,000 because it's a scam. That's what they're doing. Each person with autism has their own brand of autism, and we all need different things in different ways, which makes the one-on-one training even more important in the case of autism, right? So the idea that maybe they can send you a pre-obedience trained dog, but you've now missed out on that connection with that dog. You don't know anything about that dog's history. You didn't pick that dog. You have no connection to that dog, and you've just sent someone $10,000 that if you don't keep up with their exact training the same way they were doing it, your dog's going to unlearn it and just be a dog. So it's a giant waste of money, and it's definitely a way that people are being taken advantage of right now. So if you are looking for a emotional support animal, or into the possibility of a service animal for autism, please do not buy one off the internet. Don't buy your certificate off the internet. Nothing has to do with the internet. Do it in real life. It's a living, breathing creature that you're taking into your life. So make sure you feel that way about the animal. And that's it. Otherwise, you can find my stuff at beccalaurie.com.
Yes. And to follow her at beccalaurie.com for Instagram, and then also follow at Sir Walter
Underfoot.
that's Underfoot to learn more about emotional support animals. I hope we do this again, Becca.
Yeah.
It was so nice talking to you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
definitely give Monroe my love.
I will. I will. I'll give it Basil.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
I'll
you,
see you
everyone.
guys soon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Okay. Thank you guys for watching. Tune in tomorrow for Wellness Wednesday, and always remember to listen, love, connect. Bye.